So welcome to today's training session on postage handling in Midnight. Today we're going to be covering how to receive a payment for postage from a customer, how to record postage that is used, how to apply any funds that are tied to a customer or a check, and how to adjust transactions. We'll also take a look at the postage inventory module, in which you can track the balances of your postage devices like stamps, meters, and permits. We'll start by taking a quick look at the global settings, where we'll get to address a few of the drop-down menus that we'll see during the session. To start from the top, we have our accounting postage account section. Under here, in order to receive a payment to a customer, you do need to assign a postage payment account to each customer record. This is important to identify where you're assigning the funds to, either their mailing or general business account or whatever a particular customer may have funds assigned to. This is where you control that list. To assign a new account or to create a new one, you can simply type in the details, the item code, and the GL ID for integration to your QuickBooks software. And by making sure that the active box is checked, when you click Save, it does become available for general use. To remove one that is not used, you can simply modify the record to deactivate it. This makes it so the drop-down is disabled from displaying this particular line. You will not be able to delete instances of your postage payment accounts, primarily because if you have even one postage transaction associated with a specific account, deleting the account itself will leave some funds in limbo. And that would be a significant problem for anybody, such as your customers that track any of their postage information, either utilizing our portal or just by looking at our documentation. Going down, we have a little bit further in our admin postage menu. Under here, we have our postage affix. When recording the postage that's used on an order, you can select which device the job is actually mailed on. Your list can include different permits and meter numbers as well, so your different stamps and denominations and such can be created as unique line instances. For instance, you can have a stamp for a quarter, stamp for 38 cents, stamp for 42 cents, whatever you need. In here, just like in all of the other areas of our admin menu, you need to create a new instance. You can add in your new line item data at the bottom and click Save to commit it. Do note that the name and description refer to what you see on screen. The GL ID and inventory item correspond to any information related to accounting. So if you're not exporting any of your postage information to accounting, such as your client permit, as in they're paying for the postage themselves, you can simply leave the GL ID and inventory item field blank. This makes it so the record doesn't hit your accounting export and then doesn't get pulled into any of your accounting programs like QuickBooks or Peachtree, for instance. You'll also see the columns for WB permit number, permit type, rate, and your postage affixed with subtotal. These correspond to Window Book, which is an outside service that some other users of Midnight tie into for the convenience of pulling their postage from outside software into Midnight. If it's not a method that you already use and you manually import your postage, that's fine. If you do utilize Window Book, this is where you'd handle the settings for those particular instances. The list of what you have here is available in your postage inventory module for tracking and is also what's referenced on your invoices and any of your postage tracking and sales reports that refer to postage. We also have the postage estimate rates. In here is the full list of rates that would be used on an estimate, not an order. These rates add in with the quantity of the estimate's general expected quantity. to tie into what your estimated postage will be before converting your estimate into an order. When you do push this from an estimate to an order, the postage rate sum is calculated out into the order, but the instances of the rates are not. You'll have to select your individual postage affixes from the previous menu to make sure that your postage gets properly distributed with additional information such as the date, the weight, the classification, or any other detailed info that needs to be reconciled. You also have the postage spoilage submenu. And we have the postage status submenu. These two sections are simply info identifiers. They don't tie into any logic related to postage calculation and can be selected on the order to make sure that you're properly notifying your team of whatever info is necessary to get your postage properly billed. Now let's take a look at the step that may take place before you receive payment from your customer. In that case, we'd be jumping into an order that has postage. And we'll be looking at the postage prepay invoice or the postage request. Under the postage tab, you can see if there is any postage on the job. As you see in other departments, if the green bar is lit, there is a record or more records underneath that particular field. In this case of postage, I can add one of my postage affixed instances. Plug in my core data. And as I plug in my quantity and rate, my total postage sum gets calculated to let me know what my postage used sum will be. If you need to instead enter your line the other way, you can have the system reverse calculate by plugging in a quantity and a total. It will give you the option to update your postage rate. And if you click yes, that calculates the rate out of the postage total. So in this case, we can now prepare our postage prepay invoice, which refers to the amount of postage that we're requesting from our customer. I'm sorry, that would be referencing the postage required being pushed into the postage prepay invoice. So this is what we're giving our customer as documentation, and any payments they make can be made when they're given their funds to us via check or online payment. So typically after you send this postage prepay invoice to your customer and receive payment, you can record your payment by either doing it from within the postage module or within the order itself if your CSRs or sales reps are responsible for recording payments. We'll start by looking in the core module. If you go into your tools under the postage module, you have the ability to receive payment. You can start by selecting your customer, your deposit account, and filling in your check number amount and whether or not the funds are tied to that specific order by earmarking the funds or by placing them in escrow, making them available for all funds. To confirm this, we can look at our 5Z's Designs business cards order. We can select our customer. We can pick one of our 2 core accounts. Plug in a check number, which corresponds to either the number on the check or any number that makes sense internally. And we can import the amount of whatever we'd like. So that way it can either be the check amount to cover the bill or the check amount if it's additional. In this case, if your customer is paying by cash or by check, it doesn't necessarily have to include the check number. The cash payment can simply be marked as cash. But it still needs to be populated so that way the funds can be associated with the respective transaction. So in this case, I'll place escrow as my escrow or earmark option. So my funds are now available on any order. And I'll also import a check for the valued amount of $58.75 to indicate that they're covering their postage funds, which were included on the postage prepay invoice. I'll select earmark in this case, and under here I can pick any job that is associated with this specific customer. In this case, I can select my business cards job. When I save it, now these funds are only available for that particular job. So now I've posted a payment. Let's go back into the same order. Under the postage tab, now I can see that I have a summary of information that's not only the sum of postage used, but the sum total of all current escrow, as well as my outstanding postage bill and my earmarked funds. So at this point, if I click the Apply Funds button, I'm given the ability to actually process the payment. I can pull my funds out of the respective deposit account. And if I have any leftover, I can check the Apply Leftover to Services. So that way the remaining balance of, in this case, the 5 cents, gets applied to my services due. So now in this case, this is the leftover that was applied. And if instead you click no, the funds have the option to get placed into escrow or to be left on the check to be considered a refund by reporting to simulate a credit balance. If I were to do the process from inside of the order instead with one of my CSRs or sales reps, I can just click the Receive Payment button. The only difference by doing this process is that your customer, definition of earmark, and your order number are pre-selected. So that way all your team has to do is fill in the check number or payment ID number, the account that it's going into, and the amount that the check is coming in for. If you either click Save and Close or Cancel, you are brought back into the order form. Whereas in the other screen, if you hit Cancel, you simply reset the transaction form. So in this case, I've set up my postage. I've marked a payment that I've assigned as earmarked, and I've processed it. I've also made a payment against the postage, but I've not yet covered the additional funds of the services amount. After we've applied all of our funds from earmarked, if we need to pull additional funds from escrow, We can do that process again by clicking the Apply Funds button and pulling funds out from escrow. Or we can go into another check and adjusting the total on that particular check against the specific job. In this case, what we would do is enter the adjustments. In this case, we would select our customer and look for any checks that have additional funds available. The outstanding balance of $12.50 that we received earlier can be used in this case. And in here, we can process a transaction to add a line of a payment against our particular order against either postage or services. In this case, I can simply apply a $400 payment, give it a date, and save. But before you can save out of this window, you do need to confirm that your check amount and your check detail total equal out. If you click Save in this case, you're given a warning to let you know that the two totals don't equal each other, and you'll be unable to process the transaction that you're trying to make. In this case, you can just edit the escrow line and reduce the funds available in escrow by the amount for all other lines below. So that way your check detail total matches your original check amount. And because we have a remaining balance of $850 left in escrow here, we can select other outstanding balance orders and apply them to either services or postage. And as the funds deplete to zero, we then find ourselves with a zero balance of escrow in which we can delete the entire line for. So now in the case of a job that has multiple versions, you can have postage under each version of the job. And by processing your transactions within each version, they are strictly applied to those particular versions and can be, again, pulled out from either funds related to earmark on the job or within the escrow balance of the customer record itself. Now, if we take a look at one of our invoices that records postage, our invoice price, for instance, we'll see a breakdown of our expenses related to services, our expenses related to postage, any payment totals that were applied versus checks that were received. And then we can see that our applied total matches the payment applied to show the remaining total balance due, which is what the customer would still owe you if positive. Or if you over apply, what would effectively be considered a credit or a refund to the customer, which would have to be processed as it's a separate line within the postage check itself. Now, a really quick way to get a glance of all of the postage info that's outstanding for your customers is to enter the View Balances section of the postage menu. Under here, we can get a quick view of our current available funds that are sitting in escrow, our current earmarked and or applied funds, which responds to funds that are simply not available for any other job and tied to a specific job. Our used on orders total, which shows all of the postage that we have outstanding. And then our remaining balance, which is simply the sum of the escrow minus the offset of the earmarked and used on orders. I'm sorry, the escrow minus the used on orders. We can also look at some of our reports. Under our postage reports list, we have access to our postage used by date, which allows us to view utilized postage by a date range. Typically, this would be a report that you send to your customer to let them know the outstanding expenses related to any postage examples for their respective jobs within a time period. The date here is referencing the postage date. And if we have postage that does not have a date, you can find that available in the postage used no date report to let you know that you have postage yet to assign to something that's being sent out. You also have the postage used by date summary, which consolidates your postage information. In this case, instead of each individual line, it simply lets you know the sum of postage on your particular jobs. And you also have the postage detail by customer report, which gives you a breakdown of all of your activity on a particular customer within a date range. Today, we can see that for my customer 5Z's designs, we started with a balance of $248,000. In this case, we've received our 2 checks, and we've applied funds of $400 from our first check under our main account and our $58.75 from our USPM account. This lets us know how many funds or how much left in our funds can be found within each account, as well as a total escrow balance. And if we're doing a search for multiple customers, a total amount of available funds that are sitting in our available queue. If you just want to see information on the checks received, you can instead load the checks received by date range report. In this case, you'll see exactly that, with information matching the check entry screen that we saw in the receive payment window. And much like the postage balance view balances screen that we saw, we have the postage balance customer summary, which shows us the info that we saw a moment ago. Only by default, this will show your records of customers that have a 0 balance. Whereas in here, 0 balance or negative balance instances are hidden. Now, to identify the postage that we've used on this particular job, we want to go into our admin menu under the postage inventory section. By accessing accounting postage inventory, we can see in here details on postage transactions that are made. And lastly, if we're preparing to take a look at any of our final core postage information for invoicing and to balance that out against our sales, we can look at our job costing reports and sales reports with tax and postage to see that information en masse. Our default sales report with tax and postage will show a breakdown of all of orders that have any postage applied. We can also get a view of our postage inventory reports to compare that against our postage information here. And if you are exporting your postage records into your accounting software, you may wish to use our GLID totals report to look at any exported jobs and get a glimpse of any exported postage that should be touching your accounting program's interface with not only the postage amounts themselves, but any taxes associated with those postage instances. That's pretty much a core breakdown of everything postage related in Midnight. Again, this postage isn't specifically tied to the postage records themselves, like your postage affixes for stamps and such, but they do share a relationship. And if you have any other questions on clarity for these regards, you may need to check with us to make sure that your accounting system and your postage setup in Midnight both sync.